Well, we're at time at 11:10, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to this breakout session. It's entitled One Health, Collaborative Approach to Ensuring Human, Animal, and Ecosystem Health. My name is Lee Heron, and I'm Vice President of Venture Development for the Georgia Research Alliance, and I will be moderating this panel session. We will be addressing questions toward the end of the session, and questions can be submitted at any time. And to submit those questions, please use the chat function in Pathable rather than Zoom. If you have that option, we'll be monitoring both chat boards, so it doesn't make any difference which one you use, but use one or the other to submit questions at any time. So before we get started with the panel discussion, I would like each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves. And why don't we start with you, Susan, and then we'll proceed with Teshome and then Ria.
Thank you very much, Lee. I'm Susan Sanchez. I'm a professor of infectious diseases in the College of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Georgia. I'm also the director of One Health at college at the university level. And I currently serve as a section head of microbiology and molecular biology of our state veterinary diagnostic lab, and as a technical director of our CLIA laboratory, very focused right now on COVID-19 testing.
Thank you. Teshome?
Yeah, my name is Teshome Mebasian. I'm a director at I have to tell you the name. It's a difficult name. Boehringer Ingelheim Animal Health. It is an animal health industry. It's a German company, privately owned. Before it has acquired the company here in Athens area. There was another French company called Merial. So both of them have been dealing with taking care of animal health. And I'm a veterinary virologist. I did my PhD in Germany, moved to the US, and then particularly to Athens area in 2009. And we have been addressing vaccine approach, therapeutic approach against infectious diseases, but also non-infectious disease. Our company is making more focus now on this transboundary emerging disease, and I will be moving to Lyon next year, establishing a transboundary and emerging disease department that is very related to One Health.
Very good. Thank you, Teshome. And now Ria.
Thanks so much, Lee. Hi, everyone. My name is Ria Guy. I'm a PhD and a doctoral epidemiologist within CDC's One Health Office. I've been with the One Health Office for about 3 years, before which I was trained in research and academia as a disease ecologist. And since January, I've been working on CDC's COVID-19 response as part of a One Health working group. And I am the surveillance and response unit lead as part of that working group.
Very good. Well, thank you. So to frame up our discussion, I'd like to start with a description of One Health. So let me get to this. So everyone should have a slide. Basically, it starts with One Health, and I'll just read this. One Health is a collaborative, multi-sectoral, and transdisciplinary approach working at the local, regional, national, and global levels with the goal of achieving optimal health outcomes, recognizing the interconnection between people, animals, plants, and their shared environment. That's directly from the CDC website. Also, want to bring everyone's attention to the fact that we're one day past One Health Day, which inauspiciously was also on Election Day. So I know it received little to no attention, but I saw this graphic, which Maria was kind enough to send me, and it does portray sort of what One Health is all about. The relationship between humans, animals, and the ecosystem in which we all live. And I love this statement: when we protect one, we help protect all. So with that, let's get back to the panel. and the questions. And since we're talking about COVID-19, COVID-19 in 2021 and beyond, let's start with this as a first question. How has One Health shaped the trajectory of the COVID-19 pandemic, both in its emergence and continued spread? And more specifically, if you could comment on the role of the human-animal interface in COVID-19's emergence, and also the fact that it is a zoonotic pathogen that continues to infect animals globally. So that's a lot, but if I could ask each of our panelists to address that question, primarily just the trajectory and the fact that COVID-19 or the SARS-CoV-2 virus is still around, it's still infecting people and humans worldwide. So Ria, why don't we start with you this time? We'll work backwards.
Sure, thanks, Lee. So this is pretty much what I've been working on every day since January. So basically the One Health Working Group at CDC is part of the official CDC response. And within our team, what we're mostly focused on is the zoonotic aspects of SARS-CoV-2 transmission. And obviously there's a lot of human-to-human transmission, and that's certainly the majority of all transmission events that are occurring. But we do know, of course, now that COVID-19 started in an animal. We believe that animal to have been a bat of the Rhinolophus genus. And we don't know yet if there was an intermediate host involved, but we do know that at some point it moved from a bat potentially into an intermediate host and then onto people. So it started in animals, much like any other coronavirus that's been high consequence, like this one. So SARS-CoV before it and MERS-CoV also. And we know that it also does infect animals in some rare circumstances. So the demographics of animals that we're seeing are a few. The primary one that's occurring all throughout Europe and in the United States are mink farms. There's been large outbreaks on mink farms in Denmark, Netherlands, and then sporadic instances in other European countries like Spain and Italy. And also in the United States, we now have 11 mink farms that have been confirmed positive for SARS-CoV-2. And in mink, the disease causes respiratory illness, just like in people, and it also increases mortality events on these farms. We don't know yet if mink are transmitting the virus back to people, but it is the only situation where that has seemed like it could have occurred based on publications that have been released. We also know that SARS-CoV-2 can infect companion animals like dogs and cats, and we've seen a few published reports, as well as we're tracking about actually over 100 cases globally of companion animals that have been infected throughout the world, including over 70 here in the United States. And it has also infected zoo animals, which is a bit of a strange one, but we know of tigers and lions in the Bronx Zoo. Those were actually the first cases in the United States of infection. So it's certainly not just a human pathogen, and I think the implications moving forward of the zoonotic aspects of SARS-CoV-2 will become more apparent as the human pandemic becomes, or hopefully comes more under control.
Very good. Tashomi, would you like to address that one as well?
I mean, it has been well said, and just to add a few points. I mean, with the COVID, there are also couple of perhaps positive aspects. One is, it gave us an opportunity to be, with our family together, just because most of the people are working from home. But the other fact is really the emergence of COVID strengthened the reality that the interconnection between animals, the environment is so strong, and it really reflected this fact. And as described already, this disease originated from bat, intermediate host, animal was involved, then jumped to humans. Now from humans we see the infection of the minks and companion animals. So for us, since we are paying attention in this area, particularly in addressing questions. For instance, for cats, do we need vaccine? We have been looking at that opportunity very closely. For dogs, is there any need? Vaccine. The interconnection is so deep and complex, and I think it helped us to understand that complexity. And what we need is the collaboration. And for that, it's not an animal health issue, it's not a human health. We have to work together in order to address future pandemics and this one as well.
Very good, thank you. And Susan, on to you.
Yes, I would just like to mention that I support everything that my colleagues have said, but one thing that we are looking at is things that have happened already, but we need to be looking at things that could happen. And one of those, and the USDA is monitoring this with other groups, is what happened if SARS-CoV-2 moves into other wildlife species within the US. So what would that entail? So it's not about, One Health is not about being reactionary, it's being proactive. And that's where we're working together, and sharing information and data is critical. It's not a matter of working later to figure out how to minimize it, is to look in the future, see how can we prevent it from happening.
Good, thank you. So I just want to remind everyone, because we've had a few people join, that we're going to have a Q&A session toward the end of this panel discussion, and you can enter your questions using the chat function either on Zoom or Pathable. So moving on to the next question, and Susan, you provided a good segue into this, which is looking to the future, which is recognizing that the factors that led to this pandemic are likely to continue and indeed intensify in the years and decades ahead. How can One Health affect the outcome and help limit the impact of a future pandemic? And I'm specifically addressing the fact that humans are encroaching on the natural habitat of certain wildlife, living in closer proximity. We're seeing the effect of climate change, which is, many people think, a factor in this pandemic. So what's One Health's role in limiting, number one, anticipating, but also limiting the impact of future pandemics? And so, Tashomi, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, I think that's the main task moving forward. That's the main task where we build the capacity to predict in the future pandemic. Unless we prepare ourselves, it will be very difficult to control. And now we have seen with the COVID, even with the vaccine approach, our exposure, like the prior existence of the SARS-CoV-1 helped us, to work with some of the platforms to optimize some, which antigen do we need, and then this is more on the vaccine aspect, but it also helped us how fast we could go with the current outbreak. So the preparedness part is very important, and that preparedness can be on vaccine, on therapeutics, and different approach. But how to prevent from happening is also another aspect where we need to get the collaboration between the industry, the government institutions, and different regions in helping us to prepare ourselves in a more strong way than where we found ourselves today.
Very good. So Susan, what's your take on sort of moving ahead? How can One Health help us anticipate and then limit the impact of future pandemics?
Yeah, so One Health has been around for a little while, and it's been for a long time, but just something we talk about. Is something that, oh, let's all work together. But really, we have had a difficult time of operationalizing it, to making it work, and to make something that we can have action. So I think we need to figure out how to incentivize those interactions that Tishel may have mentioned, how industry, public sector, everywhere around the world, we can work locally, nationally, and globally to really make it happen. And I think until we figure out how to monetize it in that way, we're not going to be able to really have the One Health type of impact that we want. We continue to say, well, we need to work with that other silo, and we need to learn the language. But without that incentive, I don't think that we're going to be able to move and operationalize One Health to the level that it will be very effective, or as effective as we need it to be, without being one silo and not the one who takes the lead on this. So zoonosis was the reason why I went into research, and I've been doing zoonosis research for a long time, and antimicrobial resistance, which is one of the biggest problems that we are facing after this current pandemic. We really need to think on how we are going to get the data. And I think the way to operationalize One Health is to be able to share data and have that data that we need, all the levels of interactions between animals, humans, environment, and other animals. And that is going to be the key for One Health to move forward. So how can we create the models? How can we create the predictions? But doing this for free, somebody needs to figure out how we can all benefit in a way from this approach. And until we do that, One Health, I'm not sure if it's going to really be able to help. We are very close to figuring it out.
Good, very good. So Rhea, I'll flip it over to you.
Yeah, I'll just build off some of the things that Susan said. So I think really the role of One Health is to improve coordination between human, animal, and environment sectors. And obviously, I'll give a bit more of a CDC approach, which is working with governments. And so one of the critical areas, or many of the critical areas, are things like response, preparedness planning, and surveillance. And what typically happens in most countries, including the US, is all of these sectors, as Susan mentioned, are working separately from one another on whatever their mission is. And the role of One Health is to try and bring all of those sectors together to coordinate and recognize that all of the sectors can have a common mission. And in working together, you can not only achieve your mission, but optimize your resources. And we're starting to see a bit of progress, like Susan had mentioned, in that area. So we're starting to see research coming out that shows dividends paid to the One Health approach in terms of money being saved, resources being saved, time being saved. Brucellosis is one example where you can vaccinate people and animals at the same time. And if you double up on your vaccination strategies, for example, and go to those households together with public health and animal health both involved, you can optimize those resources a bit better. So I think if all of the sectors work together on disease, then you will naturally work together towards optimizing health outcomes for animals, the environment, and people. And if we can start trying to steer communities away from extracting resources and turning natural habitats into farmland, which is, I think, to the advantage of public health and environmental health, those are the types of solutions that we would need to prevent future pandemics, or at least lessen their impacts.
Very good. So why don't we move on to the next question, and it relates to sort of One Health in general. And while we've all heard of One Health, it's been around for probably at least, I would think probably at least 15 years, at least conceptually. And it sounds good. And it's sort of, I think this pandemic has brought the need for a One Health approach home. I mean, it's very obvious. But, and we all recognize that SARS-CoV-2 is a zoonotic disease. But what other issues would fall under the purview of One Health? For example, Susan, I know you mentioned, antimicrobial resistance. And that's a big area because it doesn't, many people speculate that antimicrobial resistance actually starts in the animal community, particularly use of antibiotics for human use, for growth promotants in certain animals. But if you could just, and so why don't we start with you on this subject, but then we want to, just for our audience, let them know that One Health is more than just a feel-good slogan. It's something that is very tangible, that it's very broad, and that it has the potential certainly to benefit us all. So beyond just this current pandemic, what areas of human, animal health and our ecosystem fall under the purview of a One Health banner? So Susan, why don't we start with you on this one?
Okay, so you mentioned antimicrobial resistance, which is one of my areas, but I teach students from undergrad to graduate students, veterinary students, about One Health and what One Health is. But I think it's very broad, and it's not limited to infectious diseases, or, for example, even antimicrobial resistant or vector-borne diseases. I think that the approach of collaboration applies to many things. And for example, one of the things I mentioned to our students is obesity, and obesity is a problem that is happening in companion animals, happening in people, but also they're all very much associated with environments in this society that we live in. So it's not living in the wild and next to the forest, but the way we have created our new environment with cars and living very close and not to our supermarket and parking next door. We're not walking, we're not exercising, and we have lots of food available. So this is a problem that you don't bring your environment, but the environment is part of the issue. So we need to think about the One Health as in a broad sense. But definitely antimicrobial resistance is one of the biggest problems we have this century, and it's so complex that you mentioned that we have that we use antibiotics in farm animals, but we rarely hear that we use antibiotics for crops, for apples, for example. So we use antibiotics to remove the barnacles from under ships and boats in the marina. So to prevent them from building up. And so we use antibiotics in many ways. And also when we produce the antibiotics, sometimes are not produced well. And there's a lot of environmental contamination. So it's really, in many antibiotics, sorry, before I forget, once they get taken, and they get excreted, and they're excreted in an active form. So they get put into the sewage system. And for those of us that we're lucky to have some, and not for others, just directly into the environment, and they are still active. So we have a very difficult problem to resolve because of its complexity, but also if we prevent something, we're gonna create some difficulties, so maybe social difficulties and some financial difficulties. If you're trying to limit the use of antibiotics, might reduce the availability of certain products and increase their cost. So it's a problem that it just not involves MDs, veterinarians, or public health or virologists, but it includes also business people. Includes people that are creating policy. So it's a very complex problem, and that's what One Health brings, is this dialogue and ability to communicate between the different groups. It brings everybody to the table. So at the end of the day, we can resolve these very difficult problems with minimum of impact, financially, economically, for anybody, but at the same time, with great benefit for health.
Very good, thank you. So Ria, I know you're involved primarily at the CDC, primarily with COVID-19. but are there any other aspects of One Health that you're passionate about, that you feel, strongly about? And again, just for the benefit of the audience, just to give them a view of how broad this field of One Health can be.
Yeah, absolutely. There's many. So zoonotic diseases as a whole is a big one, not just COVID-19, but we work almost daily with a lot of other zoonotic diseases. One of the poster childs of One Health is actually rabies, because there's excellent One Health coordination there, because it's one of those diseases where one animal bite can lead to a human death. So really strong coordination is essential. But of course, there's foodborne illness, and anthrax is another one we work a lot with, brucellosis, influenza, of course. But aside from zoonotic diseases, Susan, I think, did a great job covering antimicrobial resistance. There's also climate and environmental hazards, which have caused a lot of problems and that we work with often. So things like harmful algal blooms, which are a big problem in Alaska. Those can essentially stifle ecosystems, and they cause a lot of food security issues for the indigenous communities. Another interesting one that we're still learning about is the opioid crisis. And I think a lot of people wouldn't really think that One Health has a role there, but it seems that these days there are some people who are actually taking prescription medications that are prescribed to their pets. And so we're beginning to train veterinarians now on how to identify potentially misleading clients. And then coming back to COVID-19, there's also implications there that are much broader than just the fact that this is a zoonotic disease. So we're looking at mental health outcomes, for example, and finding that something simple like pet ownership is boosting people's mental health ability to kind of weather this pandemic. When everybody's at home and isolated and getting lonely, having a friend to snuggle at home can make a big difference.
So true. So I've already learned something here. Obesity and opioid crisis are actually could fall under the umbrella of One Health. Now, Tashoma, you're a veterinarian who works for a human and a animal health company. So you probably have a little bit different perspective on One Health. So maybe you see it in some of its broadest forms. So if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, no, exactly. Thank you, Lee. Actually, since the concept of one health is introduced, I mean, it is not really a long time. It is 10, 15, or 20 years perhaps. But just looking back now to some of our activities or our company's activities in various areas, now we clearly see that, yeah, this is part of One Health. It basically shows how broad this concept could be, and then how the collaboration really helps. Just let me give you one or two examples. I think rabies was mentioned, and rabies is an area that our company plays a big role, particularly here in the US. I mean, outside of domestic animal-related rabies, that we have a vaccine, but we produce a vaccine which is a recombinant vaccine. And this vaccine is really fascinating. And then this is the first recombinant vaccine licensed in the US or in the world, for that matter. And the way it is currently applied is the goal is to prevent rabies in wild animals, because the wild animals serve as a source for a spillover to either humans or domestic animals. So in order to reach into the raccoons and the skunks and the foxes, what this vaccine is prepared in the form of a sachet, so it was covered with a fish meal, and in collaboration with USDA, it is distributed in the United States currently, almost on a yearly basis, in the forest area where the wild animals exist, and like USDA Wildlife Service distributes more than 6 million doses every year, and this vaccine is produced here in Athens location by Boehringer Ingelheim. So So this is, and then we have been doing this, in the early 90s, even before the concept of One Health. Another example is the food supply, the food security aspect, and there are diseases. I think for our audience's interest, I'll mention a disease, for instance, called foot and mouth disease virus, or foot and mouth disease, which affects cattle, swine, and sheep. I mean, a large group of production animals. Let's say, I don't know how many, some of you may remember an outbreak in 2001 in United Kingdom. It caused a big devastation, billions of losses because of the destruction of cattle due to the outbreak. And if such an outbreak takes place in the US, I mean, it will have a very devastating effect for the food supply, export, and in so many aspects. So our company supplies more than like 20 vaccine banks, to various governments, including the United States government, various organizations, and this is a vaccine bank against very different strains or serotypes of foot and mouth disease, in case of an outbreak, so that we to help us control or minimize the spread of the disease. Vector-borne is another example. If we have, if I take a minute of your time, where just a specific example is a Lyme disease, for instance, transmitted by ticks. You can imagine, we have vaccines that we produce here that we can give to our dogs, at least to prevent dogs. But in humans, I'm not sure whether we have vaccines at this time. So basically, we have to take some antibiotic therapy. But the incidence of Lyme, for instance, can be basically the same, because of the very close association between dogs and humans, can be very closely similar between humans and dogs. So there are various ways where this interconnection is really deep and complex, and then what we do, let's say, in animal health area could also help in preventing the spillover of some diseases to humans. West Nile is another vector-borne disease where we produce vaccines to provide protection in horses. Antimicrobial resistance has been also already mentioned. We are strengthening our capacity to address some bacterial vaccines. So what we are currently thinking is, or at least planning, is the use of this low level of antibiotics as growth promoters is getting less and less, because some of the countries in Europe, they are prohibiting that. The US is slowly moving into that. So the bacterial infection will take place still. So we need vaccines, and then which is more environmentally friendly and which is not related to type of resistance we see with the therapies. And then we are expanding and strengthening our capacity in that area. So I think I should stop here just to not take much time.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Shomi. Thanks. Good information. So next question really relates to any students that we may have in our audience, or any individual who's sort of interested in learning more or actually becoming engaged with One Health. If you're, either an undergraduate, graduate student, or already out there in the workforce, and you want to really get engaged with One Health, what advice would you give to that individual? And Susan, since I know you're actively involved in teaching, why don't we start with you on this one?
Okay, thank you, Lee. Well, they just have to have an interest and look for a mentor within your university, college, and take it from there. That's because you want to know what are the skills necessary. We teach some courses, but courses don't tell you everything. You really need to be able to work with people. To work in One Health, you have to have the skills to be able to work across multiple disciplines and some of the knowledge, because not everybody in each silo speaks exactly the same language. So if you talk to an ecologist, a pathogen is a completely different than what a pathogen means for an infectious disease person. It seems a little silly, but when you are an undergrad, that language barrier can be very challenging. I also believe that the future of One Health and global health and public health is going to be to predict, and to be able to predict other pandemics, other issues. We need really a lot of data, and the help from AI, artificial intelligence, in to be able to create models that will help us predict, and also to determine if an intervention is going to be useful. Vaccines are great, but sometimes we don't know what effect they have because we don't know what the projection of that particular infection or antibiotic resistant could have been. So we really need to be able to model. So if students that have maybe not that great love for medicine or veterinary medicine, but they're interested in computer science, they're interested in AI, there's a room for you if you think that you want to have an impact in health and health across human, animal, and environmental spectrum. So, and there is lots of different programs for once you go past your undergrad, you can go into grad school, but doesn't mean that you need to. You can go directly to grad school, and where you can choose interdisciplinary type of projects. There are very few One Health labeled degrees, but it's something that you can make yourself by pulling information and pulling classes and your research work during your graduate studies. So, and then in the future, where you're going to work. So it's still very early on, but it's all up to you. You can build it if that's something you're interested in.
Good, thank you. And Shomi, I know no one goes to school and, there's to my knowledge, no degree offering in One Health at the undergraduate or graduate level. You don't get a degree in One Health. So anything to add to what Susan mentioned?
Yeah, I think that one message is be interested and be engaged. And there are a wide range of opportunities. I mean, there are many organizations that are working on this concept of One Health. We have seen that it is so broad, and then there are various aspects. So there is a wide range of possibilities to be engaged. Whether we are interested more on the vaccine side. That's okay. That's one aspect, the prevention of some diseases. But we gave a couple of other examples where people can be engaged. There are also events, educational opportunities, like there is an annual Rabies Day, for instance. It is on September 28th, where people could get some educational information about rabies, about how can we prevent that, and then help our community. We already mentioned at the beginning of this session, the 3rd of November is it's a One Health Day. There are the various events. WHO celebrates antimicrobial resistance. Not celebrates, actually. It uses 1 week in November as antimicrobial resistance. So there are events, educational opportunities, but one can also be engaged. College, universities are one, but even in your career for the future, working for one or organization like CDC, organizations like private sector like us, would be a great opportunity to help increase the awareness and be active on this area.
Good, thank you. Ria, you're an epidemiologist, you're sort of front and center also, in the One Health, but if you're, what advice would you give, a student, a professional in getting more engaged with One Health? How would you go? And how you sort of fell into it naturally, I suspect, but anyone on the outside looking in, what advice would you have?
So I think my biggest advice is that regardless of your skills and experience and background, you have something already to contribute to the One Health sphere if you're interested in it. And I think that's part of the beauty of One Health. It's a field made up of experts from many disciplines. It's not a single discipline. That's kind of what defines it. So just to give you an example of my own office, we are made up of epidemiologists. We've got plenty of veterinarians, ecologists and zoologists, statisticians. There's a lawyer on our team. There's, of course, doctors. There's an economist and a scientific communicator. And the list goes on of the types of professions that can be dragged into the One Health sphere. So if you're interested in One Health, I'd say the most important thing to think about first is the scale that you'd like to engage in. Because One Health actually does span a lot of different scales. There's international entities like WHO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and the World Organization of Animal Health. Those are all agencies that are doing international One Health work. And then there's federal agencies like CDC, USDA, DOI. There's local governance, there's private sector, and then there's field research. So they're all conducting One Health activities, but the approach that's being taken can look very different depending on the level that you're interested in jumping in on. So I'd encourage you to consider what type of level or scale you want to jump in on, and preparing to work in teams, because I think that's the only one thing that's mandatory about One Health is it's a team sport.
I think that's a great comment. I think it is indeed a team sport. So why don't we'll wrap up our panel session with one final question, and that is, what message would you like to leave with our audience today? If there's just a, wrap up statement that, 2 weeks from now, what do you want them to remember about this particular session? So Ria, why don't we'll start with you on that one.
Sure, thanks, Lee. So I'd like to just impart that the One Health approach, it's just an approach that can be adapted to. I hope we've come across and articulated that it can be scalable to so many different situations. But what we say at CDC is that it's the way forward. There's a growing body of evidence that using the One Health approach can save lives, both human and animal, improve environments, and optimize resources. I also think it's a fun discipline to be involved in because it is so collaborative and interdisciplinary. There's never really a dull day. And to me, using a One Health approach is kind of a win-win, both for those engaging for that reason, because it is a team sport, and also for the downstream benefactors that the approach is being used for.
Thank you. Tashomi, you
just
what's your take-home message?
Yeah, just to mention or to say a statement. I think let's recognize the the deep interconnection between us people, animals, plants, and in our shared environment. I mean that's important. That we live in an interdependent way, and then let's care for each other, and let's keep this interconnection in a harmonious way. And the other one is the collaboration that has been already mentioned several times. It is a multi-sectoral, transdisciplinary approach which can work at local, regional, national level, and with the goal to achieve a better outcome for all of us. So the interconnection and the collaboration. I mean, these are the two words that I would like to leave to our audience.
Very good. Thank you. And Susan, I'll let you wrap it up. So what's your message for the audience?
Well, the take-home message for the audience, it's been very clearly explained by both Ria and Tashomi, but to tell them that this is going to be a slow process, that we all know what is good for us, but sometimes we have difficulty actually achieving this working together, because we'll chase the money, and so far all the money is still in silos. So the benefit of working together is still not there. We have very few grants, very few opportunities where One Health, the approach is required or necessary, and everybody gets the same type of credit. Normally it goes to one group or another. So we still have to do a lot of work there, but definitely it's just take home is this is the way to approach problems that are of really great importance for health, human, animal, and environment. We are all in it together, so there's no way that we can solve it by just looking at us and trying to solve our own problems without looking at others. And that it takes all sorts from all disciplines to be able to get the solutions, and we need to help keep moving the needle so we can get the type of funding that is required. So that's why I mentioned before, monetizing One Health. How can we focus and get that funding moving and flowing through? It's not just that approach, it's really is a reality.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We'd like to open it up to questions now. So reminder, just use the chat function to enter any questions that you might have. We do have one question. I'll go ahead and start with that.
I'm not sure what happened to Lee, but the question in the chat is, what is the level of support of One Health among veterinarians and clinicians in private practice?
Tashomi, you want to take that?
So the level of support
for veterinarians and clinicians in private practice.
I mean, when we talk about One Health, it's not like a single aspect. So even the veterinarians, the clinicians, they are part of this, directly or indirectly in many ways. And then, an area is particularly the vets and the clinicians trying to help in treating our animals, whether it is preventative, administering vaccine or giving some therapeutic aspects. They are part of this community, and let's say in our case, we have very close relationship in distributing and administering. Most of our vaccines go through the veterinarians or veterinary clinics. So it's not limited in one area. I mean, they would definitely have other roles as well, but they are part of the community and then play a big role.
Okay,
Thank
Ria?
you.
Yeah, I'll just add, so at CDC, we've done a few little surveys of veterinarians and medical doctors, and it seems veterinarians are often the champions of One Health. They have One Health usually pretty ingrained in their coursework as they're moving through their degrees. Usually veterinarians are well versed in what One Health is and what the approach should be doing and achieving. And clinicians, it varies. I think it's coming around more in the medical sphere for human doctors as well now too. Some medical doctors have come to our office with a very strong understanding of what One Health is, and some have had no understanding of what One Health is. And they've, subsequently drunk the Kool-Aid, I think, after working with us. So I think it's varied, but there's always room for improvement.
So I work at the College of Veterinary Medicine. So I've been here for, before here, I work at the Royal Veterinary College in London. So I've seen veterinarians over the years really switching from what it was and thought was a one medicine to moving more to one health, and to bring the environment as part of the fold of one health. That is nothing that, that environment also affects human and animal health. So that's been something that has been moving slowly. I would say that there's still some room for veterinarians and clinicians to increase their understanding, and we should continue in the schools, veterinary medicine and medical school for that matter, to continue to improve and bring home the training for our future veterinarians.
Very good. Thank you. I was actually kicked off for a while, but I'm back. So
You're back, yeah.
just in time. I don't see any more questions. So, and then we're at time anyhow. So I would like to thank our panel for a very stimulating discussion. One Health is I think it's going to be the way forward in managing pandemics in the future, and they will be occurring. So again, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you to all our attendees. I'd like to, I think the next session up is a exhibit hall. So invite everyone to join in and participate in that. So with that, we will conclude this session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah.